share my screen. And what we're using is the Discover Life female Nomada key for now. We did one session already, sort of did the initial set of characters, and now we're going to go into trickier ones. This is a tricky group. Okay.
We also don't have your camera on, my friend.
Oh, right.
Okay, now we see it, but we still don't see your wonderful face, if that was something you wanted to display.
Coming on here. And my new t-shirt that my daughter got me.
I'm delighted by that.
I like it too. I love Hello Kitty. So
new facts. It was just Sam's birthday. Was this your birthday present?
It was. So can you see the Nomada guide now?
We can. Yes.
Okay. You can or can't?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So we went through some of the characters. So we're going to go and talk about the red-haired group, as Mitchell would call them. And we're going to then get into the key to doing identifications for at least the female, but really the males too, even trickier though, which are hind tibia CT. But for now, let's deal with the scape. So if we key, and then we go back down here to our character of choice, which is this character about red-hairedness. So basically you have a set of specimens that when you look at the head, particularly the scape and the clypeus and the labrum, that's where it's most obvious, they have, instead of white cetal hairs sticking out, i.e. normal looking ones, they have some that are a tiny bit thicker. And let's see what it says here. In addition to the normal, so there is the, who spells very well here? The normal translucent or partially translucent white hairs, sometimes with a yellowish cast. There are some longer, stiffer, more upright, and opaque red scattered sparsely. Easy to overlook, but the group as a whole has a vibe too, which is very difficult to actually describe. I'll do a little attempt here. They tend to have more black in their integument. The places where you would have a yellowish cast or maculations, as we would call them, is more of a, I would call it maybe an ochre, dark orange to brickish colored. And that is a kind of indicative of the whole group when you see that. Not all, but a bunch. So let's go to look at on the scope here. And I think I'm in live view. And I want to say, oops, sorry. Debunk this, that I should be seeing something. What happens when I turn off the light? It is not reacting. Oh, maybe I have to hit live. Let's try that. Don't tell me we have the same problem again that we had last time. Which
was the thing that we did last time that you had to close this out and have it open after the Teams opened? Oh, you got it. That
might have been. I got it now, though. Okay, so I didn't realize I could get the window to become at least doubled in size up here. That's interesting.
Wonder if we see your mouse back up at a big size, which we didn't have last
week.
Oh,
you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Weird. I'm going to do the Control F3 to get on here. Okay, so here's the vibe of it's mostly the face that has this vibe, but the abdomen a bit has a vibe of its own. So you can see here there is some a yellowish to orangish ochre, maybe I would call it, color to it. That tends to be different. Usually in the other Nomada, these areas would be red, like red, like more like this down here, although that's really same kind of coloration. A red and the yellows would be yellow, like bright yellow, like maybe more like that. So in this case, it is not so, and we have the coloration that you see on your screen is pretty indicative. So these red hairs that we're going to talk about, we'll zoom in on here. So here's the labrum, and this is a good way to look for them, which is straight down. So there's these very sticky outy, darker. You can't really see the color right now, so we're going to zoom in on that. And on the scape, let's see what we can see from this far up. It's not at all obvious. We'll probably
Can you
look.
repeat what species you have?
Oh, sorry, I didn't say. This is Nomada gracilis. If we go back to the guide here, and we press this for the red-haired group, you can see, first of all, there's a couple like Spherogaster that are just lingering because we probably haven't seen, this is very rare, haven't seen the female, and so it's just showing up. But this, Composita, Gracilis, and Valida, and Vicina and Xanthura are the group that we're talking about. And then separating them often has to do with the degree that they have maculations on the abdomen or not. So back to the screen here. So let's zoom in and take a look at the specimen at high power. So now we're in high power. And these red hairs are actually scattered throughout. So you can see, I'm just going to point them out in several different times. Here's red hairs. There's a red hair. We're going to move around. You can see some red hairs back here at the crown. It's better, it's harder to see them when the background is straight down on the integument. The scape should have a bunch, and you can see them to some extent here too. There's red hairs through there. There's red hairs. It's just difficult because of the angle. We'll change that angle there. So, and then this is a good shot. You can see scattered. Here's one. These red hairs are obvious and also not obvious, right? So this is what they look like when so this is a good opportunity to see what these red hairs look like, because it's hard to just explain how they are. Let me move this so that the labrum is more in focus. And the labrum is good because normally there's not much hair at all on the labrum. And here they are just sticking way out. You can see them in outline in contrast to the background, somewhat silhouetted, but also it's opaque. And there are these white hairs, right? So those are sort of translucent, and those are the normal ones that pretty much all, I would say, Nomada have on their face. So let's shift. So this is typical, as is that coloration. And usually these have a carinate rim to the cheek as well, but a bunch of things do. Let's see if we can get a oblique shot of the scape. I don't think, well, let's see what happens. It's going to be contrasting with the background of the clay, but it's a little shiny, so maybe it'll show up. Ooh, there's a giant hair on there now. Okay, so we also have the actual antenna in the way, but I think if we zoom way in, we can see some of this action. And some species are more obvious and other species less. But here we're zoomed all the way up. There's that hair that just leapt into play. We're at our max in terms of the microscope. And you can see these red hairs on the scape. But in a lot of ways, the red hairs on the clypeus were easier to spot. But this gives it's so unusual to see anything like this on the scapes that it's good to just take a look. So here's a little bit better shot, although the light is reflecting off. I'm pretty sure those are reddish, although I could be wrong. Maybe those are white hairs. They look white from here, but I think it might be the light, and these would be, again, reddish. So let's look on the at this angle
So can you
on
clarify,
the
like, are you
Clypeus.
showing us
Yep.
the Clypeus and all of that because it's a great place to see what those hairs look like? However, in that location, they'll also be like that in that location on not red hair group nomadas, or are you giving the advice that while we say scape, we also mean all of these other locations to check for them?
Yeah, in the guide it says scape and labrum as best places to look, but basically they're all over the Clypeus. Clypeus can be really busy with hairs, so sometimes, and the scape and the labrum are places that are usually not busy with hairs, so that's why I'm pointing those out. But does that make sense? So here
Yep.
are, you can see white hairs, and they're mostly oppressed, lying down, or short and somewhat branched. These are, I believe, absolutely simple. In other words, there's no branching on them, and they just poke out above. So this now, I would hope, kind of seems obvious. Here you can see red hairs here too. Obviously different, but again, a little tricky to um, talk about. Additionally, this group as a whole of bees tends to, one, be very early spring. So these are some of the first Nomada out. I will catch them in, particularly in pan traps, March, in this area. And I don't know that they're restricted to that time period, but that's how I associate them. And they're not very common. So we're talking handfuls of specimens over many years that we have collected in our area. Now, um, I also know that as you go north, tends to see more of these in collections. And when you go west, of course, all bets are off. I have seen these kinds of things, characters out west too, but really the Western Nomada are even more mysterious than the Eastern Nomada. So here's big picture again. You can see there's just a bunch of these red hairs. You really do have to kind of go in. Otherwise, it's, I think, could be passed over, particularly if you have a specimen that's a bit dirty. But recall that carinate rim, it's a little difficult to see. Just, we talked about this, pointing out that down there and the edge. Okay, so that is one of the specimens. I don't know that we need to see any more. They're all pretty much along those lines. And now we'll talk about tibial CT. And actually, this species is probably a good one to just go ahead and start with because it should have, a lot of it depends on, yeah, I think you should be able to see this pretty well. Depends on its visibility. Okay, and then let me get it up on screen, and then we can talk about orientation and how to think about this, because it took me a while to become aligned with tibial CT. Is that, I think that's the
Once we get
hind
through this
leg.
little bit, can we go back and just do a quick like show and tell of these are the red hairs and these are not on the face, just to
Uh-huh.
have them right next to each
Sure.
other in our brains? Thanks. We're
Oh,
probably
you
going to
mean
have the
like
same question with the CT.
you mean pull another specimen that doesn't? Or
Yes,
what do you mean? Yeah.
exactly. Just be like,
Okay.
oh, I saw the clipius of this. I saw that. Got it.
Great. All right. So this, actually, you know what? I want to make sure that I am looking at the hind leg here, because the middle legs sometimes have CT also, but we are looking at the middle leg. So this is good. and put it back in. See if I can align it online. So we're still looking at gracilis, and let me get this in focus. And you look at that, you're like, there's nothing much going on there, but there is so much going on there. So here is the hind, what did I say? Yeah, it's the hind, gosh, is it the hind femur or tibia? I want to say
Tibia.
it is the tibia. Yeah. So, um, so actually, and you can see some of the side characters here. Look, this has pretty stark red hairs on the legs. We don't usually use them as characters because there's usually an analog or something better, like the red hairs on the face, for many of these species. But it's something in the scheme of things that differs between Nomada, but it is relatively rare that we're using leg hairs to separate things in bees. But in terms of vibe and morphosorting, that can also be something to look at. So back to the tibia. So I'm going to jump in here and bring this up as much as, so this is as far as the scope goes. So it's difficult, but a lot of you will have scopes that don't go any further anyway. So what you're looking at here is the tibia, right? And here is the end. And there's usually a corner, sort of a right angle. It's not really a spine at all. It's just a projecting triangle of integument that sticks out there in most species. That's sort of can be an orientation for you. And then across the outer face, so this is the face of the leg that would be facing outside. It's not on the inside, it's not where the tibial spurs. So you, for example, these would have tibial spurs too, but you don't see any tibial spurs there behind there. They have them. And so this is in the front, and there's no clear idea about why these things exist. But if we think again about what would normally be here, there'd be a bunch of white hairs, and there are white hairs in there. And then um, if you use your imagination mind and had a better scope and we had a better picture, you could see that there's a series of dark red CT coming off the rim, right at the rim, projecting out into space. And we often talk about the relationship of those CT and the surrounding white hairs as to whether they're long or short. And these CT can do all sorts of things. So in a few species, they're there, except that they're very long and thin and white. And so they look a lot like, in terms of form, the white hairs that are normally present, but they're longer. And if you're like, there's my triangle projecting, and here's the interior face, I'm looking through here and I see nothing but long white hairs, then it's in this white CT group that we would call it. And if you look at this one, and again, you're going to see this better under your microscope where you have a less pixelation, let's call it, more detail, and you can rotate this leg around. And often what I'm doing when I'm looking at these kinds of things to get a good contrasting picture between what's on the leg and being able to see that in silhouette or whatever is in a lot of cases, the leg is sticking out and I can put my finger as the background. So I'll put my finger back there so it cleans up if I can. Sometimes you can't because of the physicality of the specimen. I put my finger behind the specimen. It might be behind the whole specimen so that I can see these a little clearer. So a little tip. So it's the same hand that I'm using to hold the tip of the pin under the microscope. I'll stick one finger, the middle finger, behind there to see this tricky stuff better. So we'll show a bunch of different kinds of things here. So here, this has, I can't quite tell, maybe 4, 5, 6, a couple at least are long. They're dark red. They're very obvious, although it doesn't seem obvious, I think. And so that's how this particular species presents. So I'm going to show some
Wait,
more.
before you move on, 2
Yeah.
questions.
Mhm.
Eric asks what light intensity is best for looking at hairs. And I also want to ask a specific question about the location of some CT here. So which one would you like to start with?
So I think the answer is more light is better. Um, we can actually on this specimen, because I have some control because this is being, what you're seeing is mediated through the camera, is we can bump up the lighting and see if that does anything for us. If I'm not sure, maybe a little. So yeah, more is better. This is high power work too. So you're going to be looking at these things under pretty high powered scopes. So again, you're just seeing the maybe 2, 3 there. There's a triangle area, I think. Maybe there's a couple more hiding in there. This is why you're holding in your hand, you're rotating it back and forth to see these kinds of things. And then what was the other question?
So actually keep your mouse right there because I was asking about a location. You have 2 kind of chunky red ones there up toward the left, right where the top of your crosshair is hitting.
Yeah,
Left.
these two? Or no, these
These,
little
yeah,
ones?
those 2.
Yeah.
Are we seeing those from the other side of the leg or what's happening there? Because those seem equally
I'll
chunky,
look.
but different leg.
Yeah. My impression is that they're short and they're on this side. I'll look at it when I pull the specimen off and give you a better handle on that. So I'm not 100% sure. But usually
Okay.
the CT are only on this anterior face. They're not on the back. I never turn it over and look like, oh, there's more. It's really a span on, with bounded by on one side by this triangle, and then it's progressing along the rim, and you always can see them all in one view. Okay. All right, so I'm going to remove this specimen and I'm going to take a look at it under the microscope and see if I can answer Claire's question there about the nuance of that. And I got to take it off this clay thing. And yeah, those were on the front of the specimen. They were just shorter or had the appearance of being shorter. Yep, they seem to largely have disappeared. These are small, small things too, so it's hard to see. So we score these things pretty broadly, and there's categories because some of them can have like 20 or 30 all packed together very densely. So let's go, and I'm remembering that you want to see the normal white face. So we're going now to a female Nomada imbricata, which Nomada imbricata and Lucioloides are some of the most common species of Nomadas. They're big. They're probably nest parasites of Melandrina and Nomada perplexa groups, and probably other things. And they have no red hairs. So let's look first at I got no red hairs on my face, B. And oops, I'm still in I'm going to switch out of this bright light. And go back down about there. I wonder if I can click on that. Oh, it just gets up to that level. Interesting. Okay. We'll do Control and F to get full screen. So these are very bright, very colorful. It's because they have lots of reds and yellows. So we're going to go take a look now at its hind tibia and look at the CT there. Let me just take a look at the specimen and find the best alignment for a shot. I think it's on the other side. Yeah. All right. So these have two, sometimes three CT, and they're lying over, and they're bright red and they're thick, but they are literally curved over on their sides, let's call it. And I think this is the best shot here. And that's for imbricata and luteoloides, those are definitive. So when you see that CT pattern, you know it's one of those two. Then you have to look at other things to differentiate the two Nomada species. Okay, so this is the wrong side. So here are the two spurs. So it's on the other side that we want to look, not that side. What am I thinking? Let me just look at this here and change it to this view. So tibial spurs are on the back side of, so there's a hind leg going off to here. And the tibial CT that we care about, and I might have to do this a couple times to get the alignment right for this
Are you on the mid
particular
leg
group.
there?
I don't think so. Let's take a look. Yeah, so there's a mid leg. This is the hind leg.
Oh, I saw the one in the background. Got it. Thank you. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Always good to check. Oh, here is the triangle. These are the two CT. We'll just pause here for a second. I'm going to get you a better look than this. But it's hard because you can't really see how bent they are. They look fairly straight, just curved down, but they're actually curved in towards the viewer here. So there's one, there's the other behind it. There's our pulled out portion of the edge of the anterior face of the apical end of the tibia, which is always there, and we essentially never use that for ID work. I'm going to shift it now so that you can see this curvy part of it. See if I can do this. No, whole lot of taking it off the stand. Let's take this down. There we are. Hind leg. Ooh, I didn't move it far enough, but we'll look at it right here anyway. Just so you can see it again. So we've shifted it a little bit. There's the pulled out integument triangle. Here's the two CT right there. We're going to turn this a little bit more. In other specimens, that area between that triangle and the edge where those CT are would be filled with other CT. Not in this one, for whatever reason. And we see this well enough, or do I? You can see why this is, now I've bent it over too far. So let me bend it back that direction.
Do we ever see like thick clear ones or just the thick red ones?
Say it again.
Do we only have the ones that are short and thick like this in the red category, or are there also
Mostly
clear, white?
Yeah, mostly they're red, but sometimes a few have on the yellow end of the spectrum. And oh, this is good. And then I'm not sure if there actually are. I think there, mm, yeah, there are. So in the micro um, Nomada group, another uncommon group. Ugh. Okay, no, we're good. And this one actually has three. So a lot of times I think it's two or three. I just think of it as having two. All right. So we have rotated this whole section a bit. Here is the pulled out triangle. It's seen on edge, so it looks more claw-like, but seen straight on, it's more like a triangle. Then we make our little merry way across the interior face. Again, often in other species, that whole area has CT. This group does not. And we hit the corner, the opposite corner from where that triangle is. And here are, I wish I could blow this up more, but here are three CT curving over like that. And this is only these two species have that sign. So there's one, two, three, and you can see in contrast to the last one, these are much fatter and certainly shorter. There's our measurement is the height in comparison to the surrounding white hairs, which are just ubiquitous, and they're clearly shorter than the surrounding white hairs, curved over, a lot fatter. That combo, really the curving over is, um, locks us into that group of two species. Okay, we're ready for another set? So this is useful. This is, like, yes, of course, we know what a CTR, but it's really kind of useful because it took me a long time to figure these out or to get comfortable with them or to get the orientation of the tibia, CT, what am I looking for? What are they talking about kind of thing. So let me get a couple more, if that's okay.
While he's looking, I just wanted to tell everybody, your friend Will Peterman sent me an email reminding me that Catherine Odanaka sent or posted West Coast revisions to the Nomada, and I forgot to send those out. So I'll dig them out and
I didn't
just
realize that
send
she
them
had
along
done
today.
West Coast specimens. I would like to see that too. Yeah, she's been working on these things for a while. All right, articulata. I need a female. These look like males. Oh, nope, I think there is one female in here. Articulata is related to, wait a minute. No, that's another male. Um, has a host that's not Andrina. So most of Nomada have hosts in the Andrina genus, but there's quite a bit of variability. And some of the groups that are sometimes included in Nomada and sometimes not included in Nomada wander off and pick up other genera. So this group, and I'm showing you now, I'm moving to australis, and which is closely related to articulata. And the difference between the two is solely based on the relative length of the CT. So these CT are very important. So australis has longer ones and articulata has shorter ones. Australis is less common, but you can have both in an area. Articulata in particular can be relatively common and they are nest parasites of Agapostoma. Right, let me bring this down. Find our end of
Both
the, yeah.
Are we saying
Right.
both friends in this group, articulata and australis, are parasites of agaposmin, or just articulata?
Yeah. Nope, both. And they both look exactly the same. So in females, there's no maculation, so there's no spots on the abdomen and on the thorax or anything. It's just this red, very heavily pitted specimen. And then you have to look at the hind tibia. And ooh, there we see. So you can see here, I believe that's the corner. And here's where imbricata had its CT. And here in between is now where articulata, no, australis has what are slightly longer CT than australis, articulata, sorry. But here, these are pretty easy to see. So this and we give counts in the CT, and we talk about whether they're opaque or not, and color in the guide as some of the characters that help differentiate with plenty of overlap, because sometimes it's difficult to decide whether it's fat or skinny. But here, clearly, fat, opaque, red, CT, marching in a row across. Recall the first one we saw, gracilis, had a couple long ones and then shorter ones, and they were thinner than this and pointier and longer. Nomada, imbricata had a couple over here, and they were all packed together and they were bent over like little hot dogs. So there is another example, and I'm going to show you a few more. How fun it is to have an entire video on tibial CT of Nomada. I wish I had my whole collection, but I have a pretty good sample here we get to look at. Let's take a look at the bidentate group of Nomada, which are a big mess. So the group as a whole, I worked with Molly Reitmeyer. I think we did like 1,000 specimens of Nomada and several hundred of these bidentate. We knew that the bidentate group was extremely difficult and problematic and had all sorts of males that were not associated with females and that sort of thing. All right, so I'm going to put this under the microscope here. And what we found was that, and then up at Sophie Cardinal, up in the Canadian National Collection, also did some more work, and both kind of came to the same conclusion using different molecular tools and neither published because it was so messy that it was very difficult to have clear groups. So something's going on there. I think we've talked about this in the past. Something is going on here with this group and its sister taxa in the white CT group. But they have one of the things that differentiates the bidentate group is different from the white CT in numerous ways. Well, not numerous. The bidentate mandible is so nice and clear of a feature, but everything else is murky, and we just couldn't find clear boundaries. These CT, so here we go. Look at these. Here we have some lovely CT to look at. There's our projecting triangle. Most of the action is at the corner. There's one lone one there. And we would look at these and we'd put them into different categories based on the CT patterns, and they didn't match the molecules, darn it. So we're still unclear as to what's going on with this group. And I only identify Nomada maculata, which has, I might pull a specimen, but it's got a really big, it's got mostly two CT that are shaped as parens, and one bigger, one thinner. Anyway, this is very typical. Again, a different pattern there.
Is this
This is a
maculata?
bidentate. Nope, this is bidentate species. So I don't know what
Got it.
this is. That's the problem. I just call them all bidentate group right now because I don't feel confident in any determinations. And there's a bunch of names running around that just don't mean anything at this point. So anyway, you can see pretty long, very red, thinner than the last one we were looking at, about as thin as the first set that was on the gracilis, but not straight curved. So there is all this lovely characters, and those are pretty stable. You'll see something like that, but in some there'll be 3, and others will be like 10. And then another will have one spade-like or shovel-like or table knife-like CT sticking out, and they patterns in the molecules will vaguely conform, but not absolutely. So anyway, something's going on there. Let me pull a couple more specimens that are slightly, again, the CT are slightly different. So you really want to nail looking at these CT patterns. Even if you're still just doing morpho species, the CT patterns are going to tell you a lot. So we'll do a sister taxa here. This is the pygmaea group. They look on the surface, if you looked at them, they look almost exactly the same. And there's this pattern, which I don't know is true or just some story I'm making up, that in a particular area, the white CT species look like the bidentate species. We do know, I'm fairly certain, that these, this is a sneaky little specimen that does not belong here. Oh, that's because it's composite. I'm like, this is a red-haired species. So it has similar CT to the first one.
Sam, I think I'm going to ask you to write up a one-pager that just sums up some of these groups, because I know I'm getting lost. So just look out for that.
Right. I could do that. Not this week, but harass me. I'm very harassable. All right.
Just dictate it to us and we'll write it.
Now we're looking at the sister taxa of the bidentate species. This is Pygmaea group 1. Or wait, is it? Or is it Crossonia? It literally probably doesn't matter. Pygmaea, I have labeled it because I don't even trust those group names really. But I do know that it does not have a bidentate. Is that going to work? We'll try a different angle on this. It does have a simple mandible, not with a tooth. Thus, it is not a bidentate group. Only the bidentate group has toothed mandibles. And it has white CT. Or does it? Darn it. A bidentate specimen. I'm looking at the CT. I'm like, those are not white. And indeed, it is a bidentate group specimen. All right. Why is it in there? Let's go back and find. The problem is I have lots of males in this partial collection. What'd you say? Oh, okay. You'll have to call pick. And the weird thing is I'm not down, but I might actually be. So we have been having some problems with pick. I wonder if let me go back here, go to this and do a refresh. we've been having some Discover Life. Pick is working with us on Discover Life. Yeah, it looks like it's down on my part too. Hang on for 1 second. Let me call. Where's my cell phone?
Can we ask Sydney to call or whomever's
Sydney,
in there?
could you call Pick?
I can call Pick. You should not call Pick because it's going to be a 2-hour.
Okay. Well, he's waiting for us to say, and he'll reboot server. Okay. Thank you, Sydney. All right. Blah blah blah. And oh, anyway, so I'm trying to find something that is not a male here. That seems to be not the case.
Sam, would now be, or after this be, Joan has a really good question that seems like it might be a complex answer.
Mhm.
So just know that that's coming down. Do you want me to read it now
Okay.
or do you want to get your B up?
You can read it now, and I'll try and get this. Oh, I've got a denticulata, which is a white CT species here, and I'll put it on deck while you tell me what the question is.
Okay, she asks, what about Nomada cuneata, the alternative to maculata in Mitchell, and Bella and Ovada? There are a handful of people who seem confident with these IDs. Is there a character that works for Bella versus Ovada?
So I started out with Mitchell looking at those things too, and then was disabused of the idea that they exist as defined by Mitchell, and that they're part of that bidentate group complex. So I don't use cuneata. Cuneata tends to be one of the larger. I mean, I can tell you what they would generally be classified as. Cuneata tends to be larger, has really big, awesome CT, but several, when we look at the molecules, several species groups kind of align with that. Bella and Ovada are in a big sludge of multiple possible species groups. And it's possible that, hang on for 1 second, let me just focus on the angle on that. We'll do it that way. And it's possible that there's host racing going on. In other words, it's a continuum, really, not a well-defined species concept thing. And it's just not clear. And so that's why I stopped. And we would have, as I think I've mentioned before, something like Ovada and Bella are in this group and of specimens that if we looked at the molecules, we could find a bunch of things that lined up. And then we looked at the specimens, and you could get specimens, the scutum, of which could be solid black or solid red, or solid red with a tiny black stripe. And so there was no, it was like these colors, which are often used, and the old timers would use them because why wouldn't you? They're very different between the specimens, are probably close in terms of the morphological groups, are probably close to meaningless. So that's why I stopped, and that's why I have Pygmaea group, Cressonii group now, and they're also, I think, clades of species. But I try to save all my Nomada so that at some point, when someone gets the right combination or figures out names or conventions, we just couldn't come up with any morphology that matched any kind of grouping. Okay, so white CT group, this is a denticulata, and it, so here's this is as much magnification as I can get out of this. Keep shifting a little bit as we go through here, but again, we're orienting. So here are the tibial the spurs in the back, right? And each time we look at these specimens, we're seeing a slightly different angle, which is useful for you. There is our little projecting triangle on the anterior face, and then there is this relatively straight area, and then a corner, and that's where CT would live. And indeed, you can see in a very, if you look very closely sort of way, you have all this white hair. That's generally around all the time. So, and then there's these very thin, translucent white, that's why we call them the white CT group, white, and maybe there's a little bit of pale red in there. They are a little thicker. They are analogs to the CT elsewhere, but they just are like, we don't need to make ours particularly big, dark, or distinctive. There's just a few of these longer cetal hairs coming out.
Could you maybe turn down the light on that? That might help us see contrast a little better.
We'll give that a shot. Let's go way dark. So there's a little bit of fuzz in there right here. Ignore that. These are the hairs. This is also, I just think we're up against, but this basically is what you're going to look at, is something that if you look very closely, you could say there are a few starting near the triangle. Usually the pattern on a lot of these groups is that the hairs closest to the triangle are longest, and then there's a diminishment as you get further away to the corner. I don't know. I haven't made any kind of study of that, but that seems to be the general pattern. So here is one, okay, and then we have a small set of others, but they are basically so thin, so near to white that in most cases you probably would just, not even notice that there were these CT there. But there are. So what, in some ways, the way to characterize this is the lack of obvious CT, even though there are CT, and that when you do realize, oh, but almost all of them have CT. There is one or two that theoretically have no CT. I can't remember how much I believe that or not, or just not obvious. I think there truly are a couple that don't have anything going on down there, but most do. So particularly when you have something that has the pattern, which we're going to zoom back out here, the pattern that is this, which is these are all dirt ball species. Nomada is quite common. These are part of the clade that invades Andrena nests, and they so there's a quite of an abundance. So when you see something like this, you pretty much know they're going to have CT. And so when if you look closely and you're like, I don't really see anything, you're probably looking at one of the white CT groups. Additionally, the nice thing is in those two that here we can move in close. There's not a bidentate mandible. There is a simple mandible, meaning it is just a blade. There's no tooth set back. So the bidentate ones, it's really not like there's a tooth and a tooth right at the tip. It's like a mitten. So you have the end. So that would count as one tooth, and then a bump up here, very similar to a lot of the Halictidae up here, and that is your second tooth. And the other groups don't have that. But visually, from here, you wouldn't know without looking at the mandibles whether you have a bidentate or not, unless you also looked at the CT, because the bidentate groups tend to have thin CT but dark red. And sometimes they can be very obvious cuneata type of thing, and maculata. And other times it's just like the one we saw before, which would have been in that Bella and Ovada type of group. But there's several other names out there, Ulsterensis and things like that, that could also, make sure it's in the right place, be labeled that way. So
We're starting to come up to time, though I'm not
Okay.
in immediate need to
This
cut
is-
us off.
this is
But
probably good. Oh, let's see if I have an affabilis. There's a couple that have massive numbers of CT. I can't remember if affabilis is one or not. Affabilis is, I'm pretty sure, a weird Usura. Oh, lovely. Okay, we have to show this one, and then we can stop. Usura, yes, parasite. Very uncommon in the East, more common in the Midwest and potentially the West. Just make sure I've got a good view angle on this. So it looks pretty good. Over this past couple of years, I think I've gotten better at manipulating this microscope. Okay,
10
these
out
are
of 10,
big.
sir.
Pardon?
I'd say you're correct.
Okay. So this is a big honking Nomada. It might be the largest. That in Superba is a additional species in this same group. All right, so you can see tibial spur sneaking out behind. And I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that's the triangle there. And here's the front face, and it's all filled with all sorts of CT here. I think that we're still on dark mode. Let me just pump up the lighting. Yeah. And there's an errant fiber in there, but you can see that it's not as dense as some. In some, that literally they're all packed together. There's no spacing in between, but there's a lot more CT here. And these are a little bit more on the yellow, a little more on the translucent edge, but still quite thick, not super long. So they're about as long as the surrounding white or yellowish hairs in this particular case. So I guess I'll stop and ask if people have any cetal questions at this moment.
Will has added in the chat that there are a few around Puget Sound where he cannot find any CT at all. That is, none are different from the CT elsewhere on the surface of the tibia.
So you're finding some Nomada without CT. Is that, did I hear that right?
Believe so. Will, if you're still
Okay.
here, unmic.
Well, so the other thing is the males, which we haven't really broached yet, have CT that are usually shadows. This is what males often do. So the males often have a much lighter set of characters. You know, they're shadows of a strong character that a female has. Like molecularly, I guess it can't really get rid of them. Like I don't need CT, only the females need CT, but they'll still have some semblance of that. So those get really, you know, we're looking at subtlety with the females. You want to talk about subtlety, wait till we get to the males, when the CT are still valuable, but it's really a weak, much weaker version. Very similar to like lazy glossum, you know, try to find the weakened veins of the wings in the males is much more subtle than in the females. But I do think that there legit is a few Nomada, nothing's coming to mind, so they're not common species that don't have CT. Vegana might be one, I can't recall.
Will thinks they might be more common around there. Andrew asks, did Sam say which userins affabilis are associated with?
I don't know. A lot of times these are not super definitive. It's like I saw this bee going into a nest of affabilis or a nest of Usera, fill in the blank, or they're hanging around a little aggregation. Um, and sometimes, someone will dig out a nest and find one in there. But, like the smoking gun, like, yes, this species goes into the nest, and while in there is laying an egg in there and then coming back out. And then indeed a specimen of that species successfully emerged from that nest. That's a lot of work. And very rarely is it taken to that level. So I'm not sure. Just the whole thing on hosts and parasites and who's related to who is really known only in the broadest sense, and a lot of the information is implied. Like, oh, I always catch this thing when I see these things, so it must be a nest parasite of it. So
Catherine
any
responds
observation is
that
useful.
Superba and Edwardsii have confirmed userin hosts, and they're in the same subgenus as affabilis.
Yep. And suburba can occur in the east. The other one is like a Midwest to West thing. But I don't know. It could be they would, if given the opportunity, parasitize them all. The Usera are pretty much all spring species, but gosh, it could be they're only doing Hamada or something too. Or, I mean, you have Superba and Affabilis potentially doing the same work in the same crowd. How do they divide that up? So many questions. And no Nomada, no Andrina or Usera or fill in the blank Agaposman is really interested in being parasitized. So one would think that over the years, the battle, the escalation of competition and countermeasures, and it's like a war. One thing develops some strategy that works a lot, and then the other develops a countervailing strategy. So it's got to be deliciously complicated by now. They've had 100 million years to figure it out.
She has corrected that Edwardsii is actually an Andrina parasite, but still that war concept holds true.
Yep.
Where do you want to go next week, Sam?
I mean, we can continue with Nomada. There's a bunch of, and the females, we can go, like, how do you tell female luteoloides from imbricata? At some point, I'm going to just run out of specimens that are going to be useful. I keep, so, or we could just shift to the males and talk about male characters, some characters that are only in the male. Maybe another session where I talk about special features of like denticulata. No, that's the males have the specialized features. Depressa females, super easy to ID. You can show the character for that, but sometimes it's a little difficult to like, it's not a super common species, but once you see what I'm talking about, it's like, oh, I get it. And we haven't really talked about the pseudopygidial area, which often is characteristic. It's not used very much because it's very difficult in some cases, except for Depressa and a few other species, to quantify differences. But a bunch of times you look at specimens and go like, oh, the pseudopygidial area, that's quite different. So that adds to the balance sheet of why it's one thing and not another, or why it's different from one thing and another. So we can tackle those and and then move into some male characters. Again, I can't do a complete job because all my specimens are for now down at the Smithsonian, but we can bring that back out. But it's useful, I think, to become familiar with a lot of these characters.
That sounds good. I have a feeling that we're going to need an open office hours for this one. after the complexity and jumping around. So
Well,
start
yeah,
gathering your
so
questions.
well, gather your questions and then taking pictures, right? So
Facts.
you're starting to know, like, oh, these are, people send me pictures regularly, and Claire, I'm sure they send them to you too. So you can take pictures of the cetal pattern and some of these other subtleties, and we can discuss. Or not.
Well, I think we're wrapped. I took notes that next time we're going to start with lutoides versus imbricata and
Mhm.
maybe depressa. That'll probably take us through class. Yay! See you all
All right.
next week.
All right. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Sam.
Bye, everyone.